do we got? We got a couple.
Football. Eagles suck.
Astrology.
Ice cream.
I've heard of astrology and belly button rings. I feel like those go
Do
hand
girls
in hand.
still? Yeah, they do. Do girls? Are you guys still getting belly button rings? I don't know. I haven't fucked a whore lately.
Did you know that one comedian got hired by the biggest show in television history, fired 4 days later before ever setting foot on stage, and then came back 5 years later to host that same show? No second chance story in comedy history looks quite like this one. And the wildest part? The man who fired him never actually wanted to. Today on Inside the Icon, we are breaking down the rise, fall, and absolutely unbelievable comeback of Shane Gillis. Here's how they started. Shane Michael Gillis was born on December 11th, 1987, and grew up in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Not exactly a comedy hotbed. No comedy clubs on every corner. No open mics in every bar. Just small-town America. He didn't start doing stand-up until 2012, which in comedy years is actually pretty late. Most of the greats started in their teen. Gillis was already in his mid-20s when he first got on stage. He started grinding the regional circuit Harrisburg, Lancaster, Philadelphia, doing every open mic he could find. In 2015, he placed third at Helium Comedy Club's Philly's Funniest tournament. The next year, he came back and won it. That's when people started paying attention. Around the same time, 2016, he linked up with fellow comedian Matt McCusker, and they launched a podcast called Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast. Raw, unfiltered, no edits, no PR team. Just two guys saying whatever they wanted and seeing who laughed. It was exactly the kind of comedy that thrives in basements and bars, but in the internet era, basements and bars can reach millions of people. He kept building. In 2017, he became a regular guest on The Bonfire with Big J. Okerson and Dan Soder, one of the more respected platforms in the alternative comedy world. His following grew. Then 2019 hit, and everything changed. Comedy Central named him an up-next comedian. He performed at Comedy Central's Clusterfest. And in July of 2019, the legendary Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal, one of the most prestigious showcases in the world, named him one of their new faces. That's a big deal. That's the list that launched careers like Hannibal Buress, John Mulaney, and Maria Bamford. Shane Gillis, the kid from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, was officially on his way. And then came the call that every comedian dreams about. Saturday Night Live wanted him. Why it mattered in comedy history. On September 12, 2019, SNL announced 3 new cast members for season 45. Chloe Fineman, Bowen Yang, who would become the show's first ever Asian American featured player, and Shane Gillis. Think about what that announcement meant. SNL is not just a TV show, it's a career elevator. Getting on that cast is one of the fastest ways to go from regional comedian to household name. Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, Bill Hader, Kristen Wiig, Tina Fey. The list goes on. For Gillis, it was supposed to be the moment everything he'd worked for since 2012 finally paid off. And for exactly 4 days it was, because on September 12th, almost immediately after the announcement, old clips from his podcast started circulating on social media. And these weren't just edgy jokes. In one episode, Gillis and McCusker were riffing about Chinatown in New York. He used an anti-Asian slur. He imitated a Chinese accent. He said things that, by any standard, were offensive. The internet moved fast. Within hours, the clips were everywhere. Now here's where the story gets genuinely complicated, because what happened next tells you a lot about the moment comedy was living in. And honestly, the moment we're still living in, there were people who said, "This is disqualifying. You don't get to use that kind of language and then anchor the most prominent comedy institution in America." The same week, they hired Bowen Yang, the first Asian American cast member in the show's history. They hired someone who had said things like that on a podcast. The optics alone were stunning. And there were other people who said, "This is old material from a podcast, taken out of context, used to destroy a guy's biggest professional opportunity before he even got a chance to prove himself." Both sides dug in. Gillis responded. He posted on Twitter, now deleted, saying he was a comedian who pushes boundaries, who sometimes misses. He said he'd apologize to anyone who was actually offended. He didn't grovel. He didn't fall on his sword. He walked the line between accountability and defiance. It wasn't enough. On September 16th, 2019, just 4 days after the announcement, a spokesperson for SNL executive producer Lorne Michaels released a statement. It said the language Gillis used was offensive, hurtful, and unacceptable. and that Shane Gillis would not be joining the cast. He was fired before he ever did a single read-through, before he ever sat in a writer's room, before he ever stood on that stage. And here's the detail that only came out years later, one that completely reframes the whole story. Lorne Michaels never wanted to fire him. In 2024, Michaels revealed publicly that the decision to fire Gillis was not his. It was forced on him by NBC executives who were responding to pressure from an Asian advocacy group. One unnamed NBC executive later told Vulture, "Lorne was railroaded into it." Think about that. The most powerful producer in late-night television, the man who has run SNL since 1975, didn't have the final say on his own cast. That is a story about the power of public pressure, about who actually controls television, about what happens when institutional panic sets in. And it's the reason Shane Gillis had to go build his career the hard way, how one bizarre night changed everything. Here's the thing about being cancelled that most people don't talk about. It's only permanent if you stop. Shane Gillis didn't stop. While a lot of people expected him to either disappear or spend his time online fighting culture war battles, Gillis mostly just kept doing comedy. He went on podcasts. He did stand-up. He released a special completely independently on YouTube because he didn't have a network deal anymore. No Netflix, no Comedy Central, just him, a camera, and his audience. And that audience? It grew. Because here's what the firing inadvertently did. It told a massive group of people who felt like mainstream comedy had stopped speaking to them, that Shane Gillis was the real thing, that he wasn't sanitized, that he wasn't performing for critics, he was performing for them. He started selling out shows. His podcast became one of the most subscribed on Patreon in the world. As of 2024, Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast was the single most subscribed podcast on the entire Patreon platform. The platform that was supposed to be his career almost became his empire. Then Netflix came calling. In 2023, he released Shane Gillis, Beautiful Dogs on Netflix. It hit the Netflix top 10 in 5 countries. For a guy who'd been fired from TV 4 years earlier, that's a staggering number. Netflix loved it so much, they commissioned a second special. Then came his sitcom, Tires, which he co-created, wrote, produced, and starred in, launched on Netflix in 2024. It was renewed for a second season, and then the moment that nobody saw coming, February 24th, 2024, Shane Gillis walked out onto the SNL stage, not as a cast member, as the host. The same show that fired him, the same stage he never got to stand on. 5 years later, he was the main event. He opened his monologue with a line, "If you don't know who I am, please don't Google that. It's fine, don't even worry about it." The audience laughed. The internet went wild. And Lorne Michaels, the man who had been railroaded into firing him in 2019, sat in the producer's chair and watched it happen. Now, was it a perfect night? No. Reviews were mixed. Some jokes landed, some didn't. The Hollywood Reporter noted he looked visibly anxious at moments during the monologue. But here's what didn't get enough attention. Lorne Michaels invited him back again. In 2025, Gillis was announced as an SNL host for a second time. Michaels clearly never stopped believing in him. Oh, and SNL also reportedly offered Gillis the chance to play Donald Trump for the entire 50th season of the show. A massive, high-profile gig, he turned it down to go to a comedy festival with his friends. That decision alone tells you everything about who Shane Gillis is and why people love him. He could have chased industry validation. He chose loyalty to his world instead. And then there's the Super Bowl. In February 2025, he appeared in a Bud Light Super Bowl commercial alongside Peyton Manning and Post Malone. Bud Light, the brand that had become the center of one of the biggest cultural controversies in advertising history, chose Shane Gillis as the face of their comeback. The comedian who got cancelled became the face of a brand trying to uncancel itself. You cannot write this stuff. So what does the Shane Gillis story actually mean? It's not a simple story. It's not cancel culture is bad, and it's not offensive comedians always win. It's more complicated than either of those takes. It's a story about how the internet can destroy something in 72 hours and then build something bigger over 5 years. It's a story about how comedy audiences are fragmenting. The people who decide what's acceptable on network television and the people who decide what's funny on Patreon are not the same people anymore. And the gap between them is getting wider. It's a story about what it looks like to survive professional catastrophe without becoming bitter, or at least without letting the bitterness replace the comedy. And honestly, it's a story about Lorne Michaels, who hired a guy he believed in, got forced to fire him by his own network, and then quietly spent 5 years trying to make it right. Shane Gillis started in a comedy club in Pennsylvania with nobody watching. He got the biggest job in television. He got fired 4 days later. He built an empire anyway. And then he came back and they handed him the microphone. That's the story.